Welcome to the Home Team Sacramento podcast. I'm Josh Takimoto, and today we have former San Juan High School basketball coach, current track coach, and current athletic director, Coach Fred Bryant. What's going on, Coach?
Nothing much, man. Happy to be here. Appreciate you.
Man, I appreciate you sticking with me after that. I just completely fumbled the first intro. We had to record. In my 5 years of podcasting, I think I've done that twice, and it's been like years since I've done that. So, man, I don't know what the deal is, but I can tell it's going to be a good conversation because you laughed with me, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So, as well, let people know before I start asking you some questions. You came highly regarded, and I think that's important for people to know because I've said this before to people personally and privately. When Kevin Bracey recommends someone to me, whether it's for this podcast, whether it's for things outside this podcast, whether it's someone I just need to get connected with, I've always told people I take that with it's like the utmost respect from Kevin when he recommends someone. And so when he says that, I'm like, okay, I need to connect to this person, like he says, and it's not by accident that he's saying get connected. So we were having a conversation a few weeks ago, and he's like, hey, I got a guy, Coach Fred Bryant. And I remembered your name from Character Combine. I remember you were a huge supporter of us on social media and all that. And so, man, I'm just glad that you were willing to take some time out of your busy schedule to chat with me. And like I mentioned on our last podcast, didn't even do this on purpose, but last week I was talking to Nanak Tagore, and I was doing some research on him about 3 hours before the podcast. I'm like, I didn't even make that connection that I have Coach Fred on the next week. And man, I don't know if you had a chance to listen to the episode, but he had nothing but good things to say about you.
I did. Nanak is a phenomenal young man, as we spoke about.
Yeah.
Again, our story goes back to him in the 7th grade. I have a picture, and I always show it, right? Even with him, when he came into me, scrawny kid, headband, just was, not necessarily green, but, basketball skills were just kind of, he was trying to fill it out. You know what I'm saying? Love basketball, love the game. And then, as he was with me in high school, his picture, here he is standing next to me. He's taller, he's bigger, he's thicker, you know what I'm saying? And just to see this young man's growth, right? I've coached a lot of individuals, a lot of young men that have been extraordinary young men. Nanak has definitely, I went out on him. Let's just put it like that, right? Like I said, I'm not coaching basketball currently. He was the last one for me. You know what I'm saying? Like,
sure. Yeah.
He was the one that I was very attached to. I was attached to, my previous players. He was the one where it was like we spent so much time together where I was like, you know what? I'm going to go out on this guy and, won a league championship, went to playoffs and, did, certain things. And, as it is, I went out on top.
Yeah.
Although I plan to get back in at some point, but nah, man, Nanak's a great human being. I'll leave the basketball part we can talk about later, but just a great human being.
Man, 100%. And just in the one conversation that him and I had, obviously we followed each other on social media for a minute, but the conversation on the podcast, and I texted you this as well, just wise beyond his years, way more mature than his age. And it's cool to see someone his age want to connect with student athletes, right? Because like when I started getting with Character Combine, I was out of college at that point. So I was a little bit older, and I had a desire to reach out to, student athletes, but I was a little bit older, you know what I mean? He's, fresh out of high school basically, and still has that desire to connect with basically his peers at this point and kind of drop some knowledge for them so that they can become better. And it's a really cool thing that he's doing. So I wish him nothing but the best with both his basketball playing career and the podcast. But it was cool to make that connection and have you guys on back-to-back weeks because and hear you guys, the amount of respect that you guys have for each other is pretty cool. And that's what hopefully any coach that's listening to this, an athlete that's listening to this, like this is how it should be, that coach athlete relationship, that level of respect and that level of, belief Because I mean, there's a lot of coaches that, unfortunately, there's a lot of great coaches. All the ones who listen to this podcast are great, but unfortunately, we've come across coaches, I'm sure you have, where they don't, you can tell they don't believe in their athletes. They may say one thing, but you can just, an athlete can tell it's like, oh, this dude doesn't believe in me. And it's hard to compete for someone like that when you know that about them. So the fact that you can tell that Nanak, without a shadow of a doubt, knew that you were down to fight for him no matter what it took. He told a story about you driving him down to the showcase, all of that. And
Yeah.
so it's cool, man. It was a cool thing to hear. And never have I heard two stories back to back like that so closely, fit so perfectly. So, I was even more excited to have you on this podcast once I had the conversation with him.
Right on.
Yeah,
Appreciate
man. So, all that being said, tell me a little bit about your athletic and coaching background. Where'd you grow up? How'd you come out to the Sacramento area? And then how'd you get to where you are today?
Long story, but I'll try to make it short as possible. Florida born, Louisiana raised. High school, I'll put it like this. Freshman year, started varsity, averaged 12 points a game. Sophomore year, averaged 22. Junior year, averaged 30. And then my senior year, I was averaging 35. I was the second leading scorer in the state, behind oh my gosh, I'm drawing a blank right now. He ended up playing for LSU at one point. I'm drawing a blank. No, I'm sorry. He played at Maryland.
Okay.
Mouton. Mouton was his last name.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So, and at that time, as I was a senior averaging that much, he was averaging more, and he was only a junior. Phenomenal. So I was highly talented as a scorer in high school. Got to college. I came in 6'3", 155. I was super skinny. I was called like a praying mantis. Got to college, got to Old Dominion University, which, at the time, D1. Our girls will recognize a lot more. If anything, if anybody knows basketball-wise, we had Sacramento Monarchs here, Tisha Penichero, Tanti Maga, and that's who I went to school with. Tisha's, was really prominent at that time. And then her being here was really huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think she's a sports agent down in South Florida at this point. So went to ODU. Freshman year, we went to the NCAA tournament. I had great teammates. I had guys like Odell Hodge. I had Joe Bunn, Mario Mullen. I was an understudy behind Breon Dunlap, Mike Byers. I could name a lot. Going to the NCAA tournament, my freshman year was mind blowing, right? To get into the arena and thousands of people there watching you practice. And, our practice wasn't a practice. It was, you go out there, you dunk, you run through this, you do 3-man weave, it's just fun, right?
Sure.
But people knew who you were, right? And then we didn't have a not so great sophomore year. Junior year, we were really good. My junior year, I shot pretty well my junior year. Went to the NIT, beat Seton Hall, went to Butler, played in Hinkle Fieldhouse where they filmed Hoosiers. Wow. And we got blasted. I'll say that. I'll be honest with that. Butler was really good at that point. And then just fulfilled my senior year at ODU, graduated, which is, I talk about more whenever I'm talking about my collegiate athletic years, right?
Sure.
I think graduating was the most important part, because as an athlete, you have so many demands, right? You are supposed to work out, practice, go to class, go to study hall, make sure you eat, make sure you're doing things the right way. So I try to speak about that more than I talk about how, when we traveled and went here, when we went to Hawaii, when we went to Puerto Rico. I try to talk about the aspect of graduating from college. I think that surpasses anything. You're always going to have the memories of the basketball piece, but getting your degree, finishing that, completing. I speak about that with my students now. High school is about completion. College is about completion. People want to know what it is that you can do and if you can do it to your best ability. So that's my athletic piece. Yeah, just uh, Florida born, Louisiana raised. Virginia was my baby girl. And then I came out to California. My best friend was here. I moved out here in 2004. His wife worked for the Kings at the time. The Maloofs were the owners.
Sure.
And I came out and visited, man, and I just fell in love with California weather.
Yeah.
You know, the
Sure.
South is humid. You know what I'm saying? So I came out to Cali, like, oh man, this is beautiful. So I've been out here since 2004.
Awesome, man. I have so many questions based off of what you just said, but I want to ask this one before I forget. So you said Florida, Louisiana, Virginia, California. So 4 different states, very different ways of life, very different ways of doing things. Obviously, very different personalities in those different places, right? I mean, at the end of the day, they're still student athletes, but So, do you think bouncing kind of from different places, experiencing those different places, has that been a benefit to you as far as your coaching and how you relate with people? Because I imagine that it gives you this even greater understanding of human beings because you've been around so many different types of people throughout your travels, and obviously all of your teammates as you've been playing ball all these years and the different personalities. Like how much of a benefit is that to you as a coaching high schoolers?
Man, that's a great question, and actually, you answered all of it right there, right? Like just within the question, right? Yeah, just multiple cultures, multiple regions, multiple personalities, right? Um, when I graduated from Old Dominion, I went back home for a couple years, and then I got into coaching. And actually, I was assistant coach for a coach that actually recruited me from southeastern Louisiana, Ronald Cox. Great, great man. And let me add this because I always want to be mindful of. I always want to make sure I'm paying homage to the people that have been instrumental, right? Um, I haven't had a bad coach.
Oh,
I say that, and it's like, nah, you had to have one or whatever. Nah, I haven't had a bad coach. So any coach that I have interacted with has been somebody that's been super instrumental in the foundation that I've laid as far as what it is that I do. So to answer your question, as far as how did that play a part? It played a huge part. My college coach, Coach Jeff Capel, Jeff Capel Sr. He's passed away. And if you don't know, for people that don't know, his son, Jeff Capel, actually played for Duke, and then he had Jason Capel, who played for North Carolina. I used to be around those guys. Coach Capel is the one that actually put me into coaching. When I was close to finishing at Old Dominion, my senior year, and I was recruited as a 2 guard, but by my senior year, I was playing combo. And I remember being in the locker room, and Coach Capel at halftime, he would do his speech, the assistant coaches would do their speeches, whatever. And he would always say, "Hey, Fred, what do you see?" And I was just like, I was mesmerized at that the first time, but then it really garnered me to really focus in on the game itself. And I remember him pulling me in toward the end of my senior year, and he said, "Hey, look, man, you can play basketball for the rest of your life until you're done, uh, but you need to impact lives a little bit more than what you think you can do." And that's the person that really put me in. So I've benefited from everybody, every coach, the coaches in Sacramento that I've coached against. I can name a lot, right? Patrick Pavlicek, Dennis Weaver, Fletcher Johnson, Denard Wilson, Fred, it's so many, it's so many people that have moved me into a direction where I am today.
Man, I love that. I love the fact that you can sit here and say to everybody that's listening that you've never had a bad coach. I mean, that's why we do this here, is that we want to inspire and kind of add some value to what coaches are doing. And if we can get to a place where every athlete never has a bad coach, like, I mean, there's nothing better than that, because, and I'm sure you've seen it, not personally, for yourself as an athlete, but how many times do you hear these stories of an athlete who stops playing a sport completely because they have one bad experience with one bad coach that had no business being a coach. And then that derails their entire interest in the sport. And sometimes it derails even more than that, because they lose belief in themselves, all because of a coach that, wasn't really fit to be a coach. But then you have, these other people that have all these amazing experiences of men and women who are pouring into their lives. And we always say, like, anytime you talk about, anytime someone comes on this show to talk about a coach, we say, hey, who is a coach that really stood out to you? Who impacted your life? And why? It's not once has it been, well, I remember they drew up this play in the championship game and we hit a buzzer beater at the end to win the game. It's never X's and O's, it's never strategy. It's always, hey, my family was going through it, and this coach was the first one to reach out. I had my parent passed away. I mean, it's always stuff like that. And that's like, man, I wish more of the coaches that don't get it, I wish they would get it, because, unfortunately the impact they're having, they're still having an impact, just in the opposite direction. And, hopefully any coach that hears that is doing the right thing and doing coaching in a positive way understands how important, the job you guys are doing, because, I mean, the trickle down effect is tremendous.
Yes.
Yeah. And I thought it was, excuse me. It's interesting too. And I don't know if you have an answer for this. This was not one of the questions I sent you, but we've had a couple of different basketball players and basketball coaches on the show. We had Matt Johnson from Sac High. We've had Coach JT over at Kennedy. And it's interesting because I feel like all three of you guys have said something very similar. And it's a moment with a coach that's like, hey, you need to impact lives. You need to do something greater. I don't know what it is. I know that other coaches in other sports do something similar, but there seems to be this weird, like, common thread throughout basketball. Do you have any idea why that might be? I mean, is it a smaller team? I don't know.
That's a great question, and I'm feeling like I'm really stunted by it, right? But I think at the base of it all, in all honesty, right? Sports, life, sports, all the same. So when we're talking about impacting, right? Yes, we're teaching the game. We're trying to get them to be at their best potential. And I hate to use the word potential, right? That's overused, right? Everybody has potential. But when we're trying to get you to execute at a high rate, that's actually what life's about, right? Anything that you do in life is supposed to be executed at a high rate. It coincides. So when we're talking about impacting young people, all we're trying to do is to get them to get to the highest point of their lives. And it's only channeled through sports. That's the impact.
That's good. I'm thinking I shouldn't even do this podcast anymore. Like, you should just take over this podcast for me, Coach. This is great. I love this, man.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, man. No, that's awesome. Well, I wanted to ask you this too. Again, kind of going off like I told you, the questions I sent you are kind of a loose guideline, but then the things that you say kind of inspires me to go a different direction. One of the questions that I've asked quite a bit on this podcast that I forgot to send you, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but you mentioned other coaches that you've coached against and how they've impacted you even as competitors. And that's kind of our tagline for this podcast, Home Team. It's like, we might wear different uniforms. We might compete against all these teams. We want to beat the other team. We're all competitive. We want to win. But at the end of the day, when you have coaches and athletes that are trying to make their communities better, trying to make their schools better, trying to make their families and their peers better, like, we have the same mission. We're just, we're doing it in the form of competition. So all that being said, if you had to pick maybe just one or two coaches that when you were coaching basketball, let's just take basketball, for example, you were coaching and you knew that they were going to bring their very best. They were going to have their athletes prepared, and that you had to bring your very best to that game because you knew they were going to bring it out of you. Who's one coach that you just have the utmost respect for and you love competing against?
Ooh, man, Eric Wallenberg.
He was ready.
Wallenberg, man. I, I'll give you this third, man. Eric Wallenberg. He was coaching at San Juan. I was at Encina at that time.
Okay.
Man, we battled in the same league. We were in the GEL at that time, right? Golden Empire League, and I just couldn't beat this guy. I just we couldn't beat him. We couldn't thread the needle. It was none of that, man. And I just remember, I don't remember the date. Dates kind of blur for me, right? We ended up winning, man, and I was just like super like happy and joyous and celebrating with the team. And I just remember Eric came to me after the game and he said, "Coach, man, you reached the pinnacle. You're here now. It's time for you to do what you need to do and take over." And
wow,
things changed for me. Eric Wallenberg. Yeah.
I love that you had that answer ready as soon as I asked that question, because sometimes I've asked that question and they're like, man, I got to really think, or they don't want to hurt anybody's feelings and not choose someone else. But the fact that you were ready to go was awesome. That shows that was a true, genuine answer. So I appreciate that. I also want to point out, it's funny that you said the days blur, because last week Nanak said, he's like, yeah, Coach Fred says he'll probably say the dates blur. It's like, he's 100% right. You just said that.
Yeah.
Hey man, if you're listening on it, good call, man. You nailed it. That being said, I want to make sure I ask his question. So the question, yeah, obviously you listened last week, but his question was favorite coaching moment. What's the highlight of the pinnacle of your coaching career? Obviously, you just mentioned one that was a huge moment for you against Wallenberg, but besides that one, you have a favorite coaching moment?
Hey, so I listened to his podcast last night. He sent it to me. And so anyway, him and I were texting back and forth. And so I saw that as far as one of his questions, I was like, this guy, man, he's really trying to do it. And I still couldn't like come up with anything, right? Because at the end of the day, I can't put one thing over the other.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I really sat back and I thought with it, just thinking about the years, man. I've had some beautiful moments with all my kids, and all of them have special moments. There was all highlights. But if I really want to boil it down, I say the coaching highlight for me, it's just the time with the kids. There's no last second shot. I mean, there's been plenty, right?
Sure.
There's no league championship. I've been to Arco, you know what I mean? Where none of that matters to me, right? It's just my time with the kids, man. It's just those moments where we're eating at, McDonald's. We stopped on the bus. We ate at McDonald's, or I'm taking somebody home. The mini rides that I gave kids home, having those conversations. Those are the moments. There's basketball has nothing else to do with anything for me. So I can't choose anything.
All right, I appreciate that answer. Nice try, Nanak. He was probably, I wasn't sure if he was fishing for an answer like, hey, when you won that league title, where he was leading the team.
He knows me.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because you're on campus, you're an on-campus coach, right? And so we've had this conversation quite a bit over the years and I think it's pretty well stated at this point from multiple sources that if you have the opportunity to be an on-campus coach, I mean, it really multiplies the amount of impact you can have, because it's not like they can just see you at practice and then just mess around on campus during the day and then just meet you at practice again. You're always around them. And as a coach during season, you're around them a lot anyways. But if they can't escape your influence when they're like going from class to class, it's like, dang, there's Coach Fred again. Like, I can't escape this dude. Like, that's a huge, huge benefit. So was that something that you felt was important? Did you always envision that to be the case when you wanted to coach, or did that just kind of happen, by chance?
It kind of happened. I've been since I've been since I got into California 2004. I was at a scene. I was doing conflict mediation, as well as I was the JV head coach, and then I was assistant to Bryant Mitchell at that time. And I just knew being on campus, it just weighed more. And I was around a principal, Myrtle Berry, who was just like very visible. She was at everything, every game, every dance, and she always said to make sure that people see you. Not that you have to be heard, just make sure that your kids see you. The more that they see you, the more that they see you are invested in what it is that they're doing. Uh, so that catapulted me as far as like being on campus, things of that nature. I've been blessed to have great, 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 and I'm gonna say this again, great assistant coaches, right? And I had assistant coaches that were older than me that always had the old school tradition. And I'll say this: I remember the year that I was at Encina, where we were really good, and we made it to the section championship. And I remember we were about to head to an away game, and we had matching tracksuits. And I remember we we were about to load the bus, and one of the players' pants were sagging. And I just remember we was like, "Oh, the pants were sagging. We'll see you when we get back." And we left them. And so that was like, and again, I had like these coaches that were like strictly old school tradition, like, nah, this is not how we represent.
Yeah.
So anytime that we're on campus, if we're on the road, so this is a privilege. So the fact that you got your pants sagging, there's no need for you to go to the game with us. And we left them.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to say that's awesome. I mean, from my perspective, that's awesome because I think my wife's a high school teacher, and I'm not gonna say where she I can tell you off air, but I'm not gonna say where she teaches. But over her years of teaching, I'll hear stories where sometimes it feels like some coaches aren't involved unless something happens where they need to be involved. Otherwise, I don't want to say they turn a blind eye to it, but they kind of turn a blind eye to it. And so the fact that you guys are involved to that point where it's like, hey, we have a certain standard, you got to meet that standard. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how good you are, you're not coming on this trip. I'm sure any teacher that's listening to this appreciates that kind of standard that coaches hold their athletes to, because it translates to the classroom too. So I love hearing that you guys, had the standard and you held to it. Cause some people would be like, well, don't do it again. It's like, no, like we've gone over this enough. What standard we hold. So no, it's not going to happen. So that's awesome, man. I love that story.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'm sure it never happened again. Right.
No, no, no,
Yeah.
no. And the biggest part of that was the team was laughing at him. You know what I'm saying? Like,
As you're driving
so
away out the window. Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. You got to think like at some point, in the way that it registers for a lot of people, and for us, right? Um, the embarrassment piece, right? Like
Yeah.
you want people making fun of you about this, that, and the other. And we're not talking about shameful stuff, right?
Sure.
Just talking about just some things that are like truly like, hey, no, you wear your pants like this. No, we stand this way. We do this. We make sure. No, we're just talking about the straight principles of like, no, this is how we carry ourselves.
Yeah.
We're young men. This is the way we're going to be. And so, it was like, hey, we'll see you. They waving and laughing. And from that point, and here's the other part of it. I used to take him home every day.
Oh,
Nothing changed.
yeah.
Just had a conversation. Hey,
Yeah.
this is the reason why. This is the reason why we left you. And the relationship was great.
Yeah. Well, it makes sense because you built up that equity with that person, right? So they know when you do something like that, it's not out of spite, it's not out of any kind of maliciousness. It's just like, hey, these are the rules, this is the standard, you didn't meet it, let's try again tomorrow. So no, I think that's huge, because I mean, that's where in the past, I've heard athletes talk about coaches, and it gets into that weird place where almost you can't tell if it's an athlete who's being sensitive or if it's a coach who's being vindictive, right? And it gets into a weird spot. So the fact that your athletes know what you guys expect, and there's no gray area, right? It's very clear. And if they don't understand it, then they're not really paying attention. And so I think that's great. I think a lot more coaches and athletes need to hear what you just said, because, unfortunately, as we know in the world of sports, sometimes, people say whatever they want, but sometimes talent can outweigh character, unfortunately. And to your point earlier, the main thing that you guys are doing as coaches, yeah, the wins are great, the titles are great, the pennants in the gym are great, but at the end of the day, you're building up men and women to be better human beings. If they go on to play at the higher levels, D1 professional sports, great. But one day they're going to be parents. One day they're going to have their own career in college, all that stuff. And so, a lesson like that is going to be far more impactful than anything else you could drop on the basketball court.
Yeah, I agree. No.
Yeah. I'll pull my notes up real quickly. It just went away. It's interesting. So San Juan High School, I remember, at however many years ago, they made a point of changing the name to New San Juan, right, on the board. 2008. And so I feel like a decision like that is meant to have an impact on the community around, right? Like you're sending a message saying, hey, we used to do things one way. This is kind of a new era for this school, and we're going to change how things are done. So obviously, I always feel, and I'm sure there's more that went into it, but I always felt like that was a message to the community and the surrounding area saying, hey, this is what we're trying to do. One of my favorite things to talk about on this podcast is how athletic programs and coaches and athletes affect and impact their communities. Because we've always said, like, you have an athlete wearing the San Juan shorts or the San Juan hoodie or a t-shirt or a hat, whatever it may be. People recognize that, and whether an athlete likes it or not, they're going to associate you with the school because they see how you're acting in the community. So for you as a coach, and specifically for the area of Citrus Heights that you guys are in, how important is, one, your desire to impact the community as a sports program, and then two, how do you kind of get that across to your athletes? Like, hey, you're the way you move throughout the community is important to the school, but also important to our program.
So I'm gonna answer it backwards. So how we do it as far as getting them to understand the impact, right? And how you are seen within the community. So at one point in time, San Juan, and actually way before I got there, San Juan was pretty gang invested, just to be quite frank. And so that's where that 2008 bid came in to do the new San Juan, and they did some things, culinary. There's a lot of great things, right? Like it looks really good, but it was infiltrated as far as gang situations going on at the school. So I think our biggest thing now, what we're trying to do and how we're trying to get our students to understand is you are not what it used to be at this point in time, right? Like San Juan, there was a time where, and I wasn't here because I'm not from here, but San Juan sports, the school that had over 1,000 students, 1,500 students, it was the only thing really going on in Citrus Heights. It was really big. And then, it took a turn and things happened, whether it's controllable or uncontrollable. And then it got this stigma. And so now we're at a point where we're trying to teach our student athletes and students in general, like, hey, you're not what it used to be. These things are done. So when you're out here and you're in public and you got San Juan and you say you go to the school, say it with a little pride, right? People might say, well, this school, I've heard this, I've heard that. That's not what you are. That's not it anymore. just trying to get them to. We're raising expectations. I'll say that we're raising expectations. Our GPA situation right now, our district has a policy, and we've gone away from the policy. And when I say that, we've actually gone better than the policy. The policy is 2.0, you can have an F and you can go on probation. We've done away with that. 2.0, no Fs whatsoever. You can't have Fs at all. So we're trying to get them to understand that we shouldn't expect and accept mediocrity, because that is what people expect from San Juan High School because of the stigma that has been there for so many years. So we're trying to pivot them in a different direction, and want them just to be proud of where they're at. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that's huge. And I was at an event just a little while ago, and it was again, I'm not going to mention the school that was involved, but they had a similar thing. And a lot of the athletes that were at this event were saying, hey, around the community, around Sacramento, like, we're known for this, or we're known for being like this. And it was interesting because it was about 100 student athletes, and you could tell that that reputation bothered them. And to your point, a lot of it had to do with things that didn't even involve those 100 athletes or the current, class of athletes. It was other things, but that reputation carried over. And so, and that's something that, I don't know if an athlete necessarily will think about, but I know coaches do, where the work you're doing right now and trying to change that culture and shifting the GPA and the standard for all of that, like, that's going to have long lasting impact down the road. So, I heard somebody say, a trainer that we had on this podcast a little while ago, he said, I want to plant seeds for trees I'll never see grow. And I always thought that was cool, because it's like, man, I mean, it's a pretty deep thought, but yeah, so many of the things that, you guys are doing now, the way down the road, it's like, oh, this is a complete 180 from where it was, because of everything, all the time you guys are investing into raising the standard, raising the culture. So I think it's incredible.
I'm gonna add something to that, Josh. So, and
Yeah,
I
please.
said, because I've heard this all the time about, the planting seeds or whatever, but we're always watering, right?
Yes.
So I'll say this, right, Nanik, there's other individuals, other kids that I still talk to. I'm still watering.
Yeah.
So the seeds that I planted, I'm still watering. So you might not necessarily see the full growth of that seed that you planted, but you're still watering. So you do still see it, the gradual growth, right? So I always put that in. The other thing that I wanted to say was, when I'm talking about the GPA part, so San Juan, we haven't necessarily, we and I'm transparent, we haven't won a lot, right? Like,
Sure.
it's just, winning is just not been there, and a lot of factors play into that, right? So nothing, I'm not disparaging my student athletes whatsoever, right? So what it is that we're being very intentional about, when I say we, I'm talking about administration and myself, is we got to win at something. So if we can win at academics, if we can get that and we start winning here, maybe that'll transfer over. Again, this is about life, because we know once we start doing this here, once you start moving in this way and you start making these things happen, everything else becomes that revolving wheel. And that's what we're trying to teach. That's the main thing. So win at something, because right now, yeah, the athletic piece, we're struggling. It's okay, right? So if we win at this academic piece, now we can get this ball rolling.
That's awesome. No, I love that. That's a great way of looking at it. Because I imagine that if you focus so much on the winning on the athletic side, I mean, you're just going to drive yourself crazy, because it takes. I mean, that's the funny thing. Some people don't understand how difficult it is to create a program, and especially if you're taking a program that maybe has not had a lot of success and you're trying to get it to that point. It's not just an overnight thing, because, like you said, there's so many different factors that go into it, and it's not easy. But yeah, I like that. You've got to win at something. You have to create that winning mentality. and then that starts to spread from there.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
I think that's great. Oh man, I had a question based off of that. But do you get I don't know if you feel comfortable answering this. Do you get a lot of pushback when it comes to the GPA thing? How because your standards are a little bit higher than the rest of the district? Because I mean, I feel like there's always that one parent that's like, hey, well, actually, this is what the standard is. Like, well, actually, here it's not. Here it's a little higher. So, have you guys gotten any pushback, or is everybody pretty much on board with what you guys are trying to do?
Haven't got pushback yet, but that doesn't mean that it's not coming down the pipeline. You know
I
what
don't want to
I'm
speak it into existence.
saying? We've been good so far, and at the end of the day, I'm gonna give my parents a lot of kudos. The parents only want the kids to do well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, I don't know any parents that
Yeah.
don't want their kids to do well, right? Like, I don't, there might be an exception to the rule, right? But we're not gonna put that in.
Sure.
Most parents want their kids to do well. So if we're doing something where we're trying to better their kid as an individual, as a human, as a student athlete, I'll have to die on that hill. That's the hill I have to die on.
Yeah.
At the, you know what I'm saying? Because
Sure.
I only want the best, right? I know one of your questions, and I'll say it now, right? And we can talk about it more when we end this, and it's about legacy, right?
Yeah.
I thought about this really heavy. Because I don't know if people know me, whatever, right? I think at the end of the day, I just want people to know that I've done everything that it is that I could have done for them. That's what I wanted to say on my tombstone. This guy did everything that he could do. So whenever we're talking about GPAs, when we're talking about making sure your pants are up, making sure you talk a certain way, I want people to know, like, hey, you know what? Coach Fred did everything that it is that he could do. That's what I want to leave
Yeah.
here, Sacramento, what I want to leave back home. That's what I want to leave. He did everything that he could do.
Man, I love that. Yeah, I think that's man, there's been multiple mic drop moments. I'm going to tell you that right now. We could have just like ended this podcast at multiple points because, man, I love everything that you're saying. And like I said, I hope coaches are listening to this because I feel like this is the heart of behind what we do. Is why I podcast. Is why we've done it for as long as we've done it, because we know coaches like yourself and other people that have that mind and that heart for their athletes, and they want to see you guys want to see them succeed at a higher level than just sports. And so, you articulating everything that you're saying is awesome because you're doing it better than I ever could. So I appreciate that's why we have these guests on to share your insight and knowledge, man. I appreciate that. I did want to ask though, kind of going back to the, obviously and we'll wrap up here in a few minutes. I know I told you it'd be about 45 minutes. We may have to do a part 2. I'm enjoying this conversation. So if you're down to come back, if this wasn't a horrible experience for you, I'd love to have you back.
I'm out my comfort zone, but I actually feel very comfortable right now. So I appreciate you.
I was gonna say, you told me that beforehand, and I'm not gonna lie. I don't know if I believe you because this is.
I don't. Hey, honestly, Josh, I haven't been on Instagram since January. I'm.
Oh man.
Stay laid back, man.
Hey, in some ways that's probably a good thing. You're probably not missing out on too much. It's wild out there. So I've got to promote this podcast somehow, but I don't necessarily want to be there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
But so kind of going back to the culture of San Juan, and this is not just San Juan, but any school. Like I've heard coaches in the past say sometimes there's a disconnect, and I would hope that most people who are doing the hiring would take this into consideration. But I do feel like sometimes there's a disconnect between a coach wanting to come in and do great things, but not truly understanding the culture of the school. And that's a massive problem because if you don't understand who you're serving, if you don't understand the families that you're serving, if you don't understand the personalities, but more importantly, the culture of that school and that community, you're not going to connect. And it's impossible. And that goes for, I've always said that about like I said, my wife's a teacher, so all respect to teachers, but I also feel like there's certain places that certain teachers should not teach. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, there's certain personalities that you should not go there because you're not built for it. You're awesome teacher, just not there. Same with coaching. And I think you have some coaches that are like, I can change this situation. It's like, I don't think you can because you don't have the right mentality. So am I off there, or do you feel like have you guys experienced that? Because I feel like for me, seeing it from the outside, it's like, this is a huge problem. And then the coach bails because they get frustrated. It's like, well, because you didn't understand what you were doing. You knew the X's and O's, but you didn't know people. So can you speak to that a little bit?
Josh, I can't speak to anything, man. You said it. I mean,
All right,
I'm
there we go.
like, yeah. Like, and 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 I'll leave it there because I don't want to oust.
Sure.
You know what I'm
No,
saying?
I feel you. Yeah.
But you are, yeah, man. Nah, yeah, you're spot on. I think that's a lot of places, right?
Yeah.
Not just in the schools, right? We can speak about that. We can speak about that in policing, right? Like if
Sure.
you're not a part of the community there, you don't know what's going on, so you can't speak to certain people. Yeah, you understand what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
you're on the right track with what you said, Josh. So nah, there's nothing more to actually put in there. So no, you're nail on.
Well, and that's funny because a lot of this perspective for me was actually about from a podcast, and they were actually talking about that the policing side of things and how there's a very big difference between having a police officer that's from the community that doesn't just see a woman over here or a man over here. It's like, oh, that woman was actually my second grade teacher when I was a kid, and that guy is the postman that served our neighborhood. Very different thing. It's a whole different conversation, but that's kind of what sparked this idea in my head in the first place with coaches and athletes. Is like, I think if we're honest too, if we're real about it, we see the movies, we see certain movies where a coach comes in who's not from that culture, not from that community, and there's this really in an hour and a half movie they kind of learn about the culture, and then all of a sudden they have this massive impact. In reality, I think it takes a lot longer than that. And it doesn't always work out that well, but it's just an interesting thing. And I feel like a greater impact would be had if there was more focus on that. Obviously it's great that people have I think their heart's in the right place. They want to do good, but we could talk about that forever. But before I forget, I see your shirt. It says "Winners never quit," and one of my questions was, I always love asking coaches this. I like asking athletes this, but coaches too. If I took a poll of all of your athletes over the years, would they? And I said, hey, what's Coach Fred's like infamous saying? What does he say all the time? What's he known for saying? What's his phrase? Would I get a specific phrase, you think, or would it kind of be all over the board?
It'd be all over the board.
Okay.
Some of them we can't say on air.
Sure. Okay. I like that.
But if we boil it down, right? STO, seize the opportunity. There's one I'm drawing a blank on. We had the t-shirts for the best of me for a better us.
Oh, I like that.
The best of me for a better us. And then what I'm living by now, right? I'm doing life coaching. Is MOB. MOB in the rap world, in the hip hop world, was famous by Tupac, and it was money over, and we won't get into the expletive of what that word was.
I think we can put it together, right?
Yeah. But I've gone and said mindset over bull ish, right?
Nice.
Yeah, it'd be all over the board. Like I said, there's been some times, there's been a crew, especially my Encina kids, where we had one, and yeah, we can't pronounce it right now, but it wasn't bad. It wasn't that.
Sure.
But
Yeah.
just I want the kids to know that I'm not all bad and wild and crazy, but we had a go-to. We had a go-to.
I like that. Well, let me ask you this. This was
GTA was the acronym. I'll just say that GTA.
Okay. Hey, you guys, if we have any, anybody wants to do some investigating, figure it out. Let us know what you think it is. So, well, hey, you mentioned I didn't send you this question, but you mentioned I got two more questions for you. These are just fun, easy questions. You mentioned Tupac, so I'm assuming you're a hip hop fan. Back in the day when you were a player, what was that hype song? What was the song that you would play before a game, and the one that you had to have in the rotation?
That's a great question. Great question.
I feel bad asking that because that's like picking your favorite kid. I'm sure.
Yeah, man. I mean, so we're talking back when we had the Walkmans and the
Sure.
soft tip headphones,
Yeah.
you know, like, and the Walkman might skip. Uh,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
you know what? I was a fan, and I'm from the South, so
Sure.
I was a fan of Eight Ball and MJG. Uh,
Nice.
I was a fan of Master P, in which I used to play ball with Silk the Shocker and uh,
Really?
Locked Up, See Murder. So it was a community in Louisiana.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. It was just some down south,
Yeah.
bounce, get you just kind of ready. So yeah, that was my go-to.
I like it.
Yeah.
Nice. All right, man. Last question for you. Just again, a fun one. Who is, if we're talking about basketball specifically, which we didn't even really touch on that. I was more so focused on the basketball. I didn't even really look towards the track side, but uh, who's your favorite basketball player growing up all time? And then who's your favorite guy now?
I don't have a favorite now. I enjoy the
Really
game.
enjoy the
I watch
game.
I enjoy the game. And quite honestly, I don't even watch it like I used to. Growing up, Magic Johnson, uh, you know, like the Lakers, it's just always going to be the thing. I love the Showtime. Just
Sure.
love the game, the way that it was paced. Um, because I was a fan of Southern University, which is a HBCU. The coach at that time was Ben Jobe. When I used to go to his camps, he said if we're not shooting in 8 seconds or less, it's a turnover. So
Mm,
as a player, I'm like, oh yeah, I want to get this thing up. You know what I'm
sure.
saying?
Yeah.
So the Showtime was really big for me. As I grew a little older, of course, Allen Iverson, and then really where I ended up on was Ray Allen. I just loved,
Ah,
I loved the poetic justice of his jumper,
yeah.
his demeanor. Didn't get too high, didn't get too low, and then once he was done, I just watched the game. Ray Allen was probably the last one for me.
Okay. Have you ever heard that story that I've heard Denzel tell a story about he got game where they play one on one, and I think he scored on him
Yeah.
for the and he wasn't expecting it. It was kind of like he got one on him, and then after that, it was like, no, it's not going to happen again.
Time to hang it up.
Yeah, I heard him
It's like,
tell that on a podcast recently. That was pretty funny.
yeah.
No, I love that, man. Hey, this has been an awesome conversation, Coach. And like I said, and I'm not joking. I would love to have a part two at some point down the road, because I feel like I sent you a bunch of questions, and I feel like I just didn't even get to like half of them. But that's good. That's a sign of a good conversation on this podcast. Is it just naturally went some different directions. So I appreciate you taking some time to talk with us and share everything that you did. Can the listeners follow you guys anywhere on social media? I know you've been off of it for a while, but the team, do you guys have a team page or anything like that?
Team wise, we're barely scratching through. We're
Okay.
we're making some things happen. I have my life coaching page, which is Grateful Life, but that's GR the number 8 FULLIFE.org. Subscribe to that. You can get uh daily motivation, working on things like that. I am on Twitter, publish, author. So, just putting few things out there. Again, I just want to make sure everybody knows I'm doing everything that I can to help any and everybody that I may touch.
I love it. And you were kind enough last night to send me a link to the Medium um, article. one of them, and it's great stuff. I was reading it before we hopped on here, and so I would definitely recommend you guys check that out as well. So check out everything that Coach Fred is doing, um, and just keep up with them, because, like you said, you're doing awesome things, and you're giving everything you have. So let's make it worth it for him, and support what he's doing. So, Coach, man, I appreciate you, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon, and good luck with everything.
Thank you. I appreciate you.